So until we get some questions, I'm going to ramble a little bit. I was talking to a couple on the phone before I got on the chat here, and her complaint was that her husband, who is gone from home 8 to 10 hours, usually about 10 hours during the day, often doesn't call her during the day to let her know how he's doing. And he feels controlled by that because she insists on it. And when he doesn't do it, she complains and nags him and makes him feel terrible about it. And she said, well, it's really because I'm concerned about his safety, which is a clever manipulation. And I said, well, at some point you're just going to have to live with the fact that from the time that he leaves the house until he gets home at night, he might be dead. And if he doesn't call, you're going to maybe be informed of his death maybe an hour later. And she said, well, I just don't like that feeling of being helpless. And see, that identified her problem. She lives with the illusion that most of the world does, that if we work hard enough at it, that we will somehow gain control over our environments, over people, over things, so that we will be safe, so that we'll feel powerful and in control, and then we'll be happy. And that's just not the case. We have to absolutely let go of the idea that we're going to control the people and things around us, and realize that happiness comes only from feeling unconditionally loved and from loving other people. And that real power is only the ability to choose to be happy and loving no matter what anybody else around us is doing. Whereas real power, is not controlling situations or people, which is what the world thinks power is. It doesn't work. And yet most of us spend our entire lives chasing after that kind of power. It's never going to make us happy. It never will. But you look around us, it's what the whole world's looking for. That's why people are so hotly pursuing power. They're pursuing success in their careers. They're pursuing money. We think that's where it's going to come from, and it won't. She wants to control her husband's love. And the instant she reaches out and touches her husband in any way to manipulate or control him, whatever he gives her now cannot feel like it's given unconditionally. So the instant she reaches out to do anything to get love from him, she's made love impossible. Kind of ironic, isn't it, that the very thing we want, we make impossible by reaching out to get it. So we talked about that for some time. We'll see if she gets the point when we talk again in a couple of weeks. It's a difficult thing to let go of. It's a difficult thing to get it across to people that we feel happiest when we're not trying to get it from people, or that we feel safest when we're not protecting ourselves. These are things that seem to be just counterintuitive, but that have been now proven to work. And in our own lives, we've proven that the other ways never work. That when we control people, we're never happy. That when we protect ourselves, we may have moments of illusory safety, but never real happiness. We never feel loved. Here's a lady who says, I did great last week, and this week I was not able to love my husband enough, and now I'm feeling worse because I now know more intensely what is not working. So can you talk about how it gets worse before it gets better? To be specific, I'm sad and disappointed that my husband is rejecting real love after all he's been exposed to, intensive weekends, DVDs, etc. I realize I will not get what I want. That I will not get what I want is my husband to choose to learn and grow, and he does not want it. I still want love from him. I also felt I did not love him enough because if I had, he would choose real love. Yeah, that's a real tricky road. All right, so what's the next step for you is always to tell the truth about yourself and feel more unconditionally loved yourself by whom? By whoever has it. It's just such a disaster when we keep milking the bull. And we do. We keep going to the people that we want to love us. And as soon as we say those words, but I want my, you're doomed. As soon as you say, I want my husband to love me, I want my mother to love me, you're ruined. Because now you're going to have expectations of that person. Even if they do love you, you're going to ruin their love with expectations. If they don't, you'll be hugely disappointed just by having the desire that a particular person loves you. You'll ruin the possibility of feeling unconditionally loved. So what we do is we put ourselves out there. We simply tell the truth about ourselves to people, and we find out who loves us. We just create opportunities to feel loved. That's all we can do. As soon as I have an expectation, I'm screwed. So with your husband, your goal should be to get more love for yourself from whoever has it. Wise men and women in your area, wise men and women you can call, from a real love coach, wherever, from meditation, from God, wherever you can get it. Then you give him as much love as you're capable of giving him. That's hugely different from giving him as much love as he needs. Because it may be that at this point, for example, your ability to love him unconditionally is this big. And what he needs is this. So if you expect to see a change in him when he needs this, and you can only love him like this, you're going to be endlessly disappointed. You're going to be disappointed in him. You're going to be disappointed in you. It's going to make you feel less like trying. You'll be discouraged and disappointed. You got to quit that. So your goal is only to love him as much as you can. And also remember that from day to day, your ability to love, depending on how tired you are, depending on what other influences are going on, what other people are sapping love, your ability to love him is going to vary. And his demands from your love are going to change. So picture this. From day to day, your ability to love will be doing this. His demands for love will also be doing this. So picture a day when his demand for love happens to be going like that, and your ability to love is going like this. You're going to think that you failed. No. Your ability to love is actually growing. You just happen to be in a trough, at a low spot. So what? Don't think of that as a failure on your part. And never judge your ability to love by the response of the other person. So I may be loving somebody 100% unconditionally, but if they're not in a position to receive it, and they're not in a position where they want to change, it may make absolutely no difference in their life whatever. None. So you cannot judge your ability to love by his failure to respond. That's why you only judge how you're doing by your own peace of mind, by your ability to give love, not by the results. Is this making sense? He gets to make his own life. You are not in charge of him. You do not get to control him. And as you learn to love him perfectly, he still may not change. We don't know. So as you love him, all you're going to do is gather information. So let's say that you learn to love him pretty darn well, and you love him better and better. You're just going to gather information. And let's say that you love him just better all the time for a period of 6 months, and after 6 months you see zero change in him. After 6 months, then you determine, do I want to keep doing this or not? Do I want to keep participating in a relationship with somebody where he is constantly draining the love that I have? Do I want to stay in it long term? Do I want to simply withdraw from him for a time, stay in the relationship long term, but simply spend less time with him because it's draining? You just make decisions based on the information you're gathering. But you don't feel discouraged about your own progress just because he's not making any. That's a terrible mistake. And then she makes the comment here. This is great. She says, I've been measuring my worth by my ability to love. I still rely on success, even in real love, as a way to get love. See, here, all of our lives, we've had to succeed in whatever, good looks, money, sex, our careers, power, something, in order for people to like us. And when people enter into real love, very often they feel like they have to succeed in that too in order to be considered worthwhile. There is no measuring in real love. On the field of life, there are no measuring tapes. There are no scales. That's a nice thought for many of us. We don't count. There's just peace. The end result of feeling loved and loving other people is happiness. That's it. So it's not more or less than somebody else. I'm doing better than you. I should be doing better than I am. No, I'm just grateful for the peaceful moments that I have. And I don't have to measure them against somebody else or measure them against this hypothetical perfection that I should be living. This measuring and competing is terrible, has a terrible effect on us and others. Here's a viewer who says, I'm addicted to praise and I'm fabulous at getting it, but of course it doesn't last. But boy, do I fall back to my overachieving activities to prove to you that you should love me. Yes, I see this all the time. In fact, people who start off in real love will often come up to me at meetings, they'll make phone calls to me, they'll send me emails, and they'll tell me how well they're doing, and I can hear them at the other end waiting for me to praise them. And I don't. And they're disappointed. And sometimes even people will continue to call me and tell me about their successes, and I'll finally say, you don't have to earn love. You don't have to do that. It's not like out in the real world. Now, you'll hear me sometimes say when somebody reports a success, and I'll say, oh, I'm so happy for you. But I'm so proud of you? That doesn't even make sense. Why would I be proud of you? It's your accomplishment. It's your happiness. It has nothing to do with me. And we have to be careful about those words. So, yeah, it's a real tempting crossover to carry into real love our desire to earn praise. And we have to be careful in group meetings to praise people for doing well. It's a different thing to be happy for them that they feel more peaceful. I had a man once who, years ago, kept telling me how well he was doing, and finally I just reached over in a meeting and I put my hand on his knee and I said, I want you to feel what I'm doing here, and for the next 20 minutes or so, I want you to just be quiet and quit proving to me that you deserve it. Or as I said in a recent meeting in, I think it was Phoenix, there was a man in the room and I just picked him out just for fun. And I said, Walter, do you deserve to be loved? And he said, yes. And I said, no, you don't. It's not about deserving. Words like deserve and earn, those are all field of death terms, where we earn and we count and we compare, whereas on the field of life, we get loved for no reason at all. It's a lot funner. Pretty much, if you're wondering if you have a question, it's this easy. If you've had any moment in the last week where you have felt anxious, frustrated, annoyed, disappointed, irritated, then describe that situation. And it will give us plenty to talk about, because if you are frustrated and annoyed by that situation, you can be certain that most of the rest of us have had an experience just like it. Kind of a little piece of news while we're waiting for a question. We had been working for a long time, a year and a half, with the prison system to get a man out of prison who had been previously scheduled to pretty much spend the rest of his life there. And he's now out and will hopefully stay out. And he's on a 20-year probationary sentence under the Real Love Institute corrections program. So he goes to Real Love group here in Rome every week, and I talk to him every couple of days, and more often than that actually. And he's doing very well. So now we're trying to expand that, and so I've written the Georgia State Department of Corrections to their pardons and parole department today to see if we can expand that to a couple of other prisoners that I've been writing to, one of whom was a convicted murderer. And we'll see if we can't expand that to benefit some additional prisoners. I'd like to give credit to my wife, Donna, who only sucks in her breath a little bit as I describe these men that are going to be coming to our home who've been in prison for, 5, 6, 10, 20 years. Oh yes, there's a man who's going to be coming to our home who's a convicted murderer, and she only blinks her eyes for a second. I don't know many women who could do that. Here's a man who says that in working with his coach, he's come to understand that he's let his happiness depend on his soon-to-be ex-wife getting the principles of real love. You want people to be happier, but as soon as you have an expectation that they'll be, it ruins your life. Now, what's the difference between an expectation and a hope? For example, do I hope that my children will live the principles of real love, be truthful, be loving, and be happy? Sure. Gosh, what else could I hope for that would be more important than that? But do I expect them to be? I don't. I don't know what's going to come up in their lives. I don't know what they need to learn next. And it may be that there's a place in their lives where they need to visit the basement of hell like I had to learn the next thing. I don't know that. So none of us is smart enough to know what the next thing should be for anybody. So it may be that your ex-wife, for example, has to go through a really difficult time in her life before she's willing to learn anything. We just don't know that. And so it gets easier to let go of expectations of people, not just because, well, on pure faith. Many of us aren't good enough to do that. Well, I'll just let it go. But to realize we really are too stupid to know. My children will sometimes come to me and say, so Dad, what should I do about blank? Well, I'll help you work through some possible scenarios, some possible consequences of decisions, but I'm really not smart enough to know what you should do. Only you can know that. Only you can make that decision. And only she can take the path she's going to take. So it gets easier to let people go when we realize we're really, really not in control of the universe. Not even like a little bit. We're not the associate controllers. We don't hold the scales of justice. So pretty smart that the greatest single thing we can do is always the next step. And the next step is always the same. It's always do whatever it takes for me to become more loving, for me to become more loved, share that with other people, that's all I can do. A mother called me and she said, for example, but what my son is doing is going to put him in jail. Yeah? And if you scream and fuss and kick and fight, will that keep him out of jail? No. In fact, he'll go to jail, he'll run to jail faster to spite you. See what I'm saying? A mother called me earlier today. She was describing a situation with her 17-year-old. And she was saying, now a bunch of people had advised her about how she needed to clamp down on this kid and do a bunch of things, you know, and he was making some mistakes. And she called me and asked for my suggestion. And I said, sweetie, in 4 months, this kid's going to be 18 and making his own decisions. Sit down with this boy and tell him, you know, I've been controlling your life far too long. I've been angry. I've been disappointed, telling you what you ought to do. I'm going to let you go. I've done the best I could do. I'm going to learn to love you better. I trust you. I love you. She said, well, but I think he's going to make a mistake. Maybe. But if you tell him, I don't trust you, and I think you're going to make a mistake, you think that's going to make him less likely to make a mistake? It'll make him more likely to make one. Everybody does better while they're feeling loved and while they're being taught. So, to directly answer this man, you love the son that the two of you have raised so far together. And as you unconditionally love that boy, and as you unconditionally love her the best you can, that may be the best chance this woman ever has to understand what real love is. Whereas trying to control her and push her, you'll just push her away from real love. All you can do is be a living example. And this is going to apply as, let's say that the divorce goes through. And here's this boy living between two homes. I get asked this all the time. So here's a boy who's living in an unconditionally loving home and a boy who goes to another home where everything's a matter of trading imitation love. He's spoiled rotten. He manipulates his mother. So what do? Nothing. You just keep loving him. And as this boy gets older, you really think he's so stupid that he won't see the difference? He will. And as he sees the difference consistently and he sees how happy you are and he feels how happy he is while he's being unconditionally loved, you think he won't make that choice for himself? He will. You don't need to control him. Now here's somebody who's saying, I'm feeling depressed all of a sudden, and I want to cling so much. Now, it'll help me if you say, cling to whom? If you can give me the answer to that question, that would help. So the lady was saying that this particular lady who was asking about clinging is married to a man who is particularly cold and angry. And she lives apart from her husband. And when she communicates with him, he often doesn't respond. He can be quite cold and vindictive. So you have to make a decision about what you want to do with your relationship. If in all of your efforts to love him, he's made no progress whatever, and you're not seeing any difference in him at all, you got to decide whether it's worth quitting your job and taking your daughters and putting them back in an environment that could be pretty hateful and pretty angry. On the other hand, you've got to consider whether going back and being with him might possibly unite your family. I wish I could answer that question for you. But in your position, I probably wouldn't quit my job, move all the way back to another country, give it all up on the off chance that he might respond when so far he's done nothing but antagonize you. It would be worth at least visiting him. And is that a possibility? I mean, is there a point coming up when you could take a week off or even a week or two of leave from work, and go and talk to him about the possibility of the two of you doing your relationship really in an entirely different way, and explaining to him that, you know, you've made countless mistakes in your relationship, that you'd like to learn to do it completely differently, that you'd like to learn to love him rather than use him, which is what you've been doing up to this point. Now, I know he's been using you too, but you're only going to be talking about your mistakes. But the idea of clinging to him is, well, I think you know how crazy that is, because he has nothing to give you. The idea is, talk to your coach about the idea of rationally talking to him about spending some time together. This is something that you probably do need to work out face to face. Whether you take vacation time, whether you take a leave of absence from work, whatever it takes, to sit with him and talk to him about where your relationship can go. And if you sit with him and he pretty much says, I have no interest in changing, I want to continue to live the old way forever, and then you've got a decision to make. Do you want to stay in a relationship like that or not? Only you can know the answer to that. But at some point you probably do need to speak to him. Here's a man who says, right now I have a difficult time being around my ex. She invites me to dinner and other social parties, and then she behaves like we're still married. It makes me angry because of my expectation of her getting real love and what everyone else must be thinking. What do you care what everybody else is thinking? Your anger always comes from expectations, always. So when she invites you over to dinner or to social occasions and she treats you like you're still married, what do you care? Let her treat you however she wants. You simply continue to treat her more and more lovingly, the best you can. And then explore with her where this is going. I don't know how certain your divorce is. You need to tell me about that. But never worry about what somebody else's response is. That's what's so fun about real love, is that it's simple. The next step for you is always be more loving. Then you simply observe what she does in response. But you don't care what other people think, and you don't care what she is projecting to other people. You don't care if she's using you to create an appearance with other people. What do you care? All you care about is whether you are feeling more loved and you are being more loving. If somebody's using me to their purposes and I'm growing more loving, use me. It's not affecting me. If I'm becoming more loving, you can't hurt me. So use away. Here's a woman who's asking, would you talk about shyness as a running and clinging behavior? For example, when I go somewhere with my daughter, who's between 4 and 5 years old, and we meet someone I know, she will often hide behind me with her face buried in my legs and not speak. What would you recommend that I can do to help her in these situations? Obviously, loving her anyway is one thing, given that it is probably me that she learned this behavior from. I used to do it as a kid. And how can I not teach this behavior to another child? So what can you do about it at the time? Absolutely nothing. So if you're with other people, especially other adults, it's okay for your child to hide behind you at the age of 4. Do not do anything to bring her out. As soon as you do something like, well now, come on, come and meet these people, what you're telling her is that for her to hide behind you is not okay. And that is a disaster. So leave her alone. And the more you love her at home, the less she'll become afraid of everything. Some children are simply just more naturally introverted. And as they get older, you'll discover whether it's just a natural introversion or whether they're generally afraid of people. But at age 4, just love her. Just ignore it. Don't worry about it. So, Jill, it's really important that you see that this clinging feeling that you're having, when you get a feeling of clinging to him, of needing him, that you carry that out with people who can love you unconditionally, not with him. Remember, he's already demonstrated to you with his sulking, with his being withdrawn, with his being unkind to you. He's already demonstrated that he doesn't have the slightest idea how to love you. None. No clue. So then when you come at him with clinging, which essentially says to him, please love me, you're asking something of a man who has no idea how to do it. And the more you cling, the more insistent you're demanding it of him. So you're scaring him to death. So clinging to somebody who doesn't know how to love, you just couldn't frighten him more. Then what's he going to do? He's going to become even more defensive, more withdrawn, and what he does is he defends himself by becoming gruff and by becoming silent and angry like he does with you. And when he does that to you, he looks all tough and strong. He's actually behaving like a baby. I mean, come on. You call him and he'll sit there on the phone and not say a word and listen to half your conversation and then hang up the phone. That's the behavior of an 11-year-old. So he's not strong. He's in a very, very weak, frightened position. And so if you put any requirements on him, you just scare him to death. Those of you who are watching the screen are seeing an interaction I'm having with Jill. In every relationship, whether you're dating, whether you've been married for 20 years, you're constantly gathering information all the time. Instead of having expectations and being disappointed, you're loving people the best you can, you're gathering information about the response, and then you're deciding, what am I going to do next? Now there's nothing to be disappointed about. Do you see that? If I love, for example, let's say that I'm dating somebody, and I love them unconditionally the best I can. I teach them the real love principles. They seem to be responding a little bit. And after we've been dating for 6 months, this person still hasn't even read the real love book, and yet the real love principles are the most important thing in my life. What am I going to do now? Push that person to read the real love book? Are you kidding? In fact, if I've been waiting 6 months, who's the stupid person? Me. I mean, after 2 months of dating somebody, if you've told them that the most important principles in your life are real love, and they can't read a 270-page book, what they've just told you is, you're not important to me. And it's not just about real love. I mean, if I was dating somebody and I said that the history of pecan farming was the most important thing in the world to me, and I gave them a book, if I was genuinely important to them, they'd read the book about pecan farming. Do you see? So I don't have expectations about whether they'll read it. No, not at all. You simply observe what they do. And if after 2 months, 3 months, they've shown no indication to pursue, to learn about, to certainly not apply the principles of real love, aren't we done? I mean, what does it matter what else we have in common if they're not interested in learning to tell the truth and in learning to love unconditionally? Nothing else really is relatively important. I just observe what they do. And the same is true in a marriage. If I've been married to somebody, let's say I've been married for 20 years. For example, Jill has been married to her husband for a good while. So what does she do? She's learning to love unconditionally. And before she makes a decision about something like divorce, she needs to learn to love unconditionally to the point where she can have interactions with her husband where she's not afraid. Because when she's fearful and has expectations with him, there's no chance he's going to feel unconditional love from her. So she needs to keep practicing getting unconditional love from other people, and she needs to practice unconditionally loving others, and then practice loving him. As she gets better at doing that, then she needs to just observe him. Then after unconditionally loving him for 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, maybe a year, if she sees little stirrings in him where his heart is softened for moments at a time by her unconditional love, where he sees the effect of unconditional love on her daughters, gosh, those are signs. Because if you can soften somebody's heart with unconditional love once, you can do it twice, and then 3 times, and on and on. But if after a year, of loving somebody unconditionally, they have changed 0, and if the interactions with that person just drain you, at some point, you have to make a decision. Do I want to stay married to somebody where it's a constant drain? Do I want to stay married to somebody where I can really never feel like I'm going to grow to my full potential in real love? Some people actually can stay married to somebody where there's no real love coming back and can still learn a great deal about unconditional love just by giving it. But in some relationships, it's pretty tough. And in that case, some people choose to leave the relationship. But never make such a decision until you've become pretty good at loving, and you can do it without fear. If you're afraid, you'll make a bad decision. I addressed to John the possibility of his wife, who is close to divorce, entertaining the possibility of their having a different marriage with real love. And I think he's saying here that she sees the effect of real love more with their son and other people. And from the New Victim book, he sees himself as her monster. So I think that could make it difficult. Yeah, it's very convenient when we label somebody else the monster, because once we do, then we don't have to change. And she may well be doing that. In our conversation together, she was certainly eager to label you the one who needed to change, the one who would never be different. And yet, here you are, the one who's learning, growing, implementing the principles of real love in your life while she's feeling resentful and angry. So I don't know whether it may be worth you two sitting down and having another conversation about the possibility of a relationship based on real love, recognizing that everything you've done to this point doesn't really count. People are fond of saying, well, but we've already tried. That's like saying we've already tried to cross the ocean with lead weights on our feet, without a boat. Until you've tried your relationship with real love, you haven't really tried. So that's a possibility to discuss with her. I'd be glad to talk with the two of you again, but that may be something she's not willing to do. So it's at least something worth bringing up. Or we could do a 3-way conversation about it on the phone. Just a couple of possibilities to entertain before everybody gives up. Yes, that's right. Here's John saying, I can't give my soon-to-be ex unconditional love because I expect that real love will work on her and that she will change, and that if she does not change, I will be hurt further. I do not plan on giving up. I just have to... too high expectations for her and my son. Yeah. John, remember, the next step is always just, I'm going to be more loving. I'm going to be more loving over and over again. And you expect nothing from her. In fact, my guess is that a large portion of her resistance to you is just your expectations of her. The instant she feels that you're expecting something from her in return, she's going to run. And she's going to hate it. So you'll accomplish a whole lot more as far as at least seeing what her potential is by just letting her go. So you might tell her that. You might say, I've had these unreasonable expectations of you, and I apologize. You might even say, have you felt those expectations? Because I've had them. It will help her to know that you realize that you've heaped them on her. I just can't even begin to tell people the damage done by expectations. I just can't do it. As soon as, to give you an illustration, have you ever had a friend who has been converted to multi-level marketing, like Amway, and then you haven't heard from them for a long time, and then they call you up, and they say, Greg, haven't talked to you for a long time. I'd really like to get together with you. They don't need to say anything. You can smell the soap through the phone. You ever had that experience? I have. People call you and you know they're going to sell you something. They didn't call you for no reason. You can smell the expectations. And so you agree to do it because they're an old friend. And the instant you see them, you know they want something. And they sit down with you and they kind of, shoot the breeze with you for a little while so that it's not too painfully obvious that they're using you. And sure enough, they launch into a sales spiel. You could smell that from the beginning. We can smell when people are using us. And that's what expectations are. If I have an expectation of you, I am using you. I'm trying to control you. And people hate that. So until we let go of it, people can't feel loved by us. People will call me and they'll say, well, but I've loved my husband and he's not responding. Well, if you're really loving your husband, you wouldn't be irritated that he's not responding because you don't have expectations about how he's going to respond. So, John, I would just suggest that you try that with your wife. You sit down with her and you say, sweetie, I get it. I've been doing it wrong. I've been pushing you. I've been having these expectations. I want you to know that I realize it, and I'm going to try to do it differently. And I think you'll see a smile on her face. You get a huge peace of mind by not having expectations. It's amazing. You go into a situation with not expecting anything, then how can I be disappointed? I'm not going in expecting you to change. I'm not going in expecting success. I'm just going in trying to do the best I can do. I'm not even going in expecting that I will do my best. I'm just going to go in and try to. So how can I lose here? I can't. It's a very peaceful feeling. I had a man once say to me, well, but if you don't have expectations of people, then how do you expect them to do their best in competition? And I said, well, my first question would be, why do we have to have competition? Really? Competition just brings out the worst in people. And people tend to do their best when they're having fun. No kidding. They really do. And they have the most fun, obviously, when they're feeling loved. So I want to thank you all once again for coming and joining us on a Tuesday night. It's been fun. These have been great questions. They always are. Love having you here. So again, we'll see you all next Tuesday. Bring your friends, bring your questions. Write them down during the week. As you get to a situation where you experience any tension, any anxiety, any frustration, anything, write the situation down and bring it to the video chat, and we'll have tons more to talk about. So remember, it's always about real love, and we love you.